Welcome to another episode of Inspired Voices. My name is Oliver Riera, and this is Erin Dangler.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Like we talked a little bit, but like I haven't seen you in such a long time.
It has been. I really can't remember the last time I saw you.
Yeah.
I know you coached me on auditions, and we would meet at Moonlight and stuff like that. But it has been way too long.
Right.
So
Why don't you tell everyone what you do?
what do I do? Oh my God.
What do you do? What do you do, Erin?
I do a lot of things, and I'm actually in transition trying to work on some other things as well. I am an actor. I guess if I look at my email address, I say I'm an actor, a coach, and a teaching artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it's interesting that you asked that question because I've just sort of come to this realization that that acting is my job, but teaching and facilitating is my vocation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's been
Usually it's the other way around.
I know, and it's I've had sort of an identity crisis around it. Not just I've been wondering like what, because I had this whole journey of moving to Atlanta during the pandemic, and I learned a ton and whatever, and was booking some good work, and I enjoyed it and met a lot of people, but the actual acting itself isn't always that fulfilling because, well, I love the prep. I love the analyzing the script and putting the pieces together and all that kind of stuff. But I don't like working in isolation. I like people. I like collaboration. And what draws, I guess I shouldn't speak for everyone. What drew me, or has always driven me to acting, is a desire for connection and storytelling. Yeah. And the relationship that happens. And I feel like I almost feel like a heathen saying this because all these actors can be like, "What?" But it's the truth, and I really long to be as truthful as I always can be. And I just feel like there have been really, I mean, it's fun to go on set, it's fun to do things, but there just have been so few times when you finish a job and everything comes together with like both it being a meaningful project and a collaborative vibe, and where you feel at ease and you feel like you're doing your best work, and then a great product. Like to have all those things line up so rarely happens.
Yeah, it really does happen. I think it happens a little bit more in theater. Yes. Because everyone is collaborating together. Yeah. But like, once you're on the film set or commercial, whatever it is, once it's wrapped, like that's it. Sometimes you don't see the final products. It's just like on to the next job kind of thing.
And you don't necessarily even maintain the relationships with the people you're on set with. And that's, and again, I've been very fortunate to have some really great experiences. And I think that clarity of realizing doesn't mean that I have to quit acting or leave acting. It feels like a job, and it's a gift when I get it. But what I really love doing is teaching. Yeah. And what I really want to do is to use what I've learned in, I love teaching actors, but I also want to work with the craft of acting as a metaphor for people in their life. Like if you're going to analyze the script of your life, you walk through it like you would, like, okay, so who are you? Yeah. What's your objective? What are your obstacles? How do you get what you want? And so that's what I am working on now.
Yeah. That's actually the reason why I got into acting in the first place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I changed my life at like 24. Yeah. And completely negative to completely positive. And I was watching TV one day. I was like, hey, I'm going to try acting. I've never come across that. Yeah. And so I took an acting class, and I fell in love with it, and I treated it as another tool for me to be a better person, to improve my life. I had to learn how to communicate. Like at 24, I had to learn how to communicate. Yes. I did not know how to communicate well. And so acting was that for me, and like looking at those different characters and seeing how they perceive life, and comparing it to mine, and what tools that I could get from the other characters and stuff like that. So
that's really cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know about you.
So I never meant for it to go as long as and as far as I did, but that was just went along for the ride, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like though you kind of, if I'm hearing this correctly, you kind of both found a deeper connection with yourself through acting and a love of the craft itself.
Right.
And so, yes to all of that. Yes, and
right.
is I want to use that, like, not necessarily teaching non-actors how to act, but using that as a vehicle for examining your life, like kind of like rehearsing for your life, kind of thing. Like if you because I do a lot of corporate coaching with organizations using acting skills and role playing with them to teach empathy and how to create connection in your workspace. And I love it.
That's very interesting.
So much. Yeah. Because I feel like if we can do that, this is where it comes. This is where it all happens.
Yeah.
And then you can expand it, and it goes on a bigger scale.
Is that like more improv based, I guess you could say?
It is. We are given sort of, it depends. It's different from company to company. It's like some of them they're all kind of based on, I can't think of the guy's name right now, but it's a book called Courageous Conversations and How to Have Difficult Conversations, which is something that I have personally been navigating for a while. It's like, okay, I have to have these challenging conversations myself before I can, or at the same time as I'm teaching them how to do it.
Sometimes like that's how
and
it is.
I have made a lot of mistakes. So working on it. So we will, if, for example, a company is learning how to provide feedback to an employee or a team member, or having some challenging circumstances, how do you have those conversations with someone to create understanding and empathy and curiosity rather than division?
Yeah.
And we don't practice that in our culture.
No, we don't.
And it takes practice.
It should be taught in school.
It should be. And it's it can be. And but you need trained, experienced coaches who and like for myself, I need to be doing it myself. So it's almost like it's not psychiatry or psychotherapy, but it is the analyzing of people's behavior and being a mirror for them, even though it's different training.
Yeah.
So it's like I need to be doing that myself. But now that I've been doing it more, I just hear it. I'll hear when someone says, well, you should do that. I'm like, let's
rephrase
that.
A bit.
Right, exactly.
I hear that too.
Yeah.
Every time I see it in like the reality shows, especially,
too.
it's like, you did this and you did that. I'm like, ooh, take out that you in there.
Or no offense, but I'm like, don't even start with that. Or can I give you some feedback? It's like, let's take feedback off the table entirely.
Yeah.
Like feedback automatically triggers our amygdala. And it's like, I like to share some perspective. It's so much less threatening.
Come at it with your own perspective, like you said. Yeah. Just like instead of bringing it on them, bring it how you feel.
Right.
It,
Although, and now that I've exercised those muscles, I can really see it and hear it, and I enjoy doing it. Except I have been planted right in the middle of some of those circumstances that have triggered my own anxiety and my own reactivity. It's like, okay.
Yeah, so that's another challenge.
It's another challenge. So I just want to keep doing that work on a deeper level, and not even necessarily with corporations. It can be not-for-profits. It can be with communities. Yeah. It can be in schools.
Everyone needs it.
Everyone needs it, and we can infuse that creativity of, acting out a scene or like I don't know. It just
absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah,
so that's where I'm.
You have your own company, right? Don't you?
Well, I did. I had a musical theater training school for many, many years in Chapel Hill.
Gotcha, yeah.
And that was when I was already getting clear that it was time to kind of phase that out. I was actually handing it off to someone else because I knew I was going to be going back I was going back and forth to Atlanta before we moved there.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic to get training, and I couldn't. Give my whole self to both of those things.
Right.
And it was time for a change. And then the pandemic hit, so that just sped up the process. Yeah. And so I did. I loved that. It's the same thing. It's about the teaching was the vehicle for helping young performers, whatever experience they were at, find a sense of self. And how do you connect yourself with a capital S with somebody else?
Well, how was your childhood?
Oh my God!
Because like when you're talking about like the things that you're learning now, and stuff like that, I was like, oh, I wonder wonder where that stems from, and it usually comes from your childhood.
Oh, absolutely.
Like how was your childhood growing up?
It's interesting. They say, who is it that says, show me the child from 0 to 7 and I'll show you the adult.
Yeah.
So good. You're wise. It was good. And I don't know, I hope my parents aren't watching. No, it's all good. But I've done a lot of work around intergenerational family process. I study and work with a coach in Bowen Family Systems, which in my early 20s out of college, I went through, which I think a lot of people do in their 20s, is just went through a huge depression. What am I doing? You know,
trying to answer those
what
questions.
am I supposed to do? Why am I not on a tracked job? Why do I feel so depressed? And so, again, talking about the childhood is just did a deep dive into my family system.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty typical upbringing. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I was the youngest of 3. But my role in family was the caretaker.
Interesting.
And
so were you the one that stops the fights, tries to stop the fights?
Yes, stops the fight or make sure everyone else is taken care of or... And again, birth order plays so much into that as well. And
you never got a shit on by your siblings or anything like that?
Nothing major. I mean, my
major.
brother is I could tell you some stories. I mean, some picking on me, but they had their, my sister was the gymnast and my brother was the comedian, the middle child. And then I was I didn't really... I think I just kind of floated in between the family a lot, trying to keep the peace. And
were you trying to keep the peace, or were you you didn't know where you fit in?
Probably a little both.
Yeah.
Probably a little.
I mean,
both.
I guess that's what a floater is, right? It's
I guess. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want it to sound dramatic. My parents love me a great deal, and our family system has evolved just like everyone else. But again, it's going back to your story. As you look at your story, and there was nothing tragic or awful. It was just what I learned in the system, and I feel like we're all kind of born with one core issue that we work on our entire lives in a spiral, and I know that I am a caretaker. I know that I have always had a deep, I think we all do as humans, but just a deep need to belong.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah.
For real.
And that always and
that comes out in ego. That comes out in so many different things.
And where you squeeze yourself in, and it's like I've been on these 2 tracks. Like I have always been very entrepreneurial and wanting to start my own thing. And I love creating community around that. But then I've always wanted to be part of these organizations. And then I, try to squeeze myself into these organizations, but I never quite fit. I always said growing up, I was too normal for the theater world and too weird for the normal world. Yeah. So I was always like, where does this? And that's just been such a metaphor for my life.
Yeah. That's interesting. That reminds me of my life too. Yeah. Just trying to what's going on here. Yeah.
I mean, everyone wants to belong.
Yeah.
Different levels and layers. But
did you always did you have that self-awareness that you were the caretaker of the family and stuff like that?
Not until I went into counseling in my 20s and worked with this woman, just because my depression was so deep and I felt so lost. And I still work with that same woman to this day. It's evolved. I was living in Maine at the time, and we connected and did, in-person counseling for a while. And then I got to a place where I was able to manage my anxiety. I had more sense of self, and then moved around. And then when I hit some snags later in life, I just called her. I'm like, hey, can we just talk again? Can we do this over the phone? And this was years ago. Every major life transition, I would symptomize with something, whether it was some low-grade depression or some body aches and pains or something and focusing on that instead of really getting to the issue. And she evolved as well. She was a pastoral counselor because I wanted someone who had some sort of faith-based.
Okay. Gotcha.
Even though it was not at that time, I was much more black and white in my faith, and I'm more just spiritual now. And she was not black and white in her faith at all, which was just what I needed. She's so articulate and so wise. Like she is my spiritual mother. No shade thrown at my own mom. My mom is wonderful, but I needed that mentor for my life.
Yeah.
And she talked about how, as a psychotherapist, analyst, therapist, whatever you want to call it, analyst. That's a word from the 50s. I'm watching too many lessons in chemistry.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good show.
So she just said it's really, that part of therapy is really about getting people to manage their anxiety. And once they can rein in their anxiety, they are so much more capable to navigate their lives. And she realized she didn't want to be around deeply anxious people all the time. And that a coaching relationship is more where I don't want to say patient, the client takes more responsibility for their progress.
Yeah.
And she trained in Bowen Family Systems. And so part of my work with her was learning about the systems theory and diagramming my family tree and talking about the patterns and speaking in theory, which helps you bring your own reactivity down. So, and now we speak once a month, and I will do it until the day I die.
That's a nice. I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's like intergenerational family process. It's kind of the same thing.
Gotcha.
But like the different ways that the roles we play in family. But it can also be in organizations, it can be in relationships, your basic triangle of the traditional family, mother, father, child, or parent, parent, child. And that triangle dynamic and how we kind of carry that dynamic with us.
Yeah.
Through everything.
I think growing up, I was like, I knew more of what not to do for my parents than what to do.
Yeah.
And so like I made it a point to like try and break all those family generational curses and stuff like that and patterns and all that stuff. It was hard. I feel like I did a lot, but then now I'm getting to a point where like, well, I feel like it comes out in different forms. It can. And it's always somewhat going to be part of my life of trying to work it out.
Yep.
Something like that. You feel like it's the same?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I feel like we evolve through it.
Right.
That metaphor of a spiral, like we keep doing the same thing, but we're visiting it from a higher place each time. Yeah. And we're able to handle more as we go through. Yeah.
So you were in like depressed. You had a lot of depression growing up?
Yeah. What
happened?
I don't know.
What'd you do?
Well, it's weird. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. I mean, I have. I would call it. It's medically called dysthymia, which is sort of like a low grade depression, like totally able to function.
So it's like a medical thing.
I guess so. I mean, it's what Dee, this woman that I work with, would call it. So I've never really looked it up, but it's this just sort of this undercurrent. And it's, I mean, again, it's not that I'm majorly unhappy. I mean, I've got a joyful life. I've got a wonderful family.
Absolutely.
But there is, and I do take some medication just to keep it at bay. But I do go through these periods of sort of like dark nights of the soul. But they always transform me to the next place.
Yeah. Because like sometimes I have depression as well. And it might be for like no reason. Like, I don't know why I'm depressed, but I'm depressed.
Yeah.
But like and then I find myself paying attention to how people are reacting to me, people are talking to me, stuff like that. And when I'm depressed, it's almost like those little details really pop out. Like, you went like this for like a split second. Does that mean you hate me?
Yes.
Do you not like me? What's going on? Is something wrong? You know, stuff like that.
Right. Well, and it sounds, it's like whatever our insecurities are, or whatever we're concerned about, just get
They heighten.
Yeah. And it's like I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and she talks about the stories we tell ourselves in our mind.
Right.
And that's, again, it's all, going back to acting technique, it's all Meissner technique. It's like, you're thinking this of me, so I'm going to respond to you this way. Like, instead of like, can we just say honestly what we're thinking,
right,
and say it in a way that fosters a deepening of relationship?
Yeah.
And because we're afraid to be vulnerable.
Yeah, we are.
And that's and that's what I'm working on too.
I know. I have no problem, like, sharing my stories and stuff like that, and my traumas and stuff like that, because to me, I know there's probably that one person out there that it might help.
Oh, exactly.
And that's kind of like why I do what I do.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more doing it in the moment, or the right moment. I tend to wait and hide for a while. I need to deeply process before I can share something. And I've been talking about this with a friend too. And
is it because you were trying to articulate it correctly? Or?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's partly trying to articulate it, partly trying to figure out when is the right time, and also just deal with my own discomfort in sharing something. And it depends on who it is. It's like, all right, we're sitting on a camera and I'm doing this, and this feels totally comfortable, but it's harder sometimes to say these things to the people closest to you, and why is that? I guess there's higher stakes, but that's what I want to do too. It's, you talked about how you grew up in family and how you worked really hard to break those and kind of undo what they did. And I feel like so much of our, especially now that I have my own grown adult children, and it's like, I worked so hard. Not that my parents did a really good job for the place they were in their lives. They were still in college, 19.
Wow.
My mom finished college and had 3 more kids before she had the total of 3 kids before she was 25,
wow.
In the 60s. And it's just such, so you just have to bring that into perspective. But I grew up like, when I became a parent, I'm like, I'm going to do my parenting this way. I'm going to, and you kind of rail against, or you're going to fix all the things that you felt were wrong, but that end up doing your own thing that's wrong. Like, right. And I had and my own children who are just, the thing I'm most proud of in my life is my relationship with my husband and our family. Like, it's like, if I do nothing else in my life, I got what I wanted, which I'm going to probably start to cry, which feels just amazing, because I think that's what my therapy and all that stuff was about, was being able to be in a healthy, albeit not perfect relationship. But
I feel like that comes across, that you have a happy family and stuff like that.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's always come across. Every time I talk to you, every time I hang out with you, just your mannerisms, your behavior, even when you're not looking.
I feel me turning red.
Like, I feel the joy that comes out of you. That's why
it is joyful and deeply, deeply joyful. But I feel like it's hard to share, because I know not everyone is in that kind of relationship.
Sure.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
And
but we can't please everyone.
No,
right?
we can't. We can't. And for me, my story is, I feel like all that work that I did in my 20s with knowing I needed to get counseling, that for me, it was becoming a whole self before I met Brian. Like, and not everyone does that. And before I became a mother, even though I'm not a perfect mother by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like a lot of women start kind of come into their own after they have kids, because they're like, they kind of wake up to like, oh my God, I gotta figure out me so I can raise these kids. And I feel like I had a beautiful opportunity to work on myself a lot before I had kids, even though I'm constantly evolving. But now my kids are in their 20s and they're navigating their own lives. And, my daughter and I have had some, I applaud my daughter for her ability to articulate her own struggle with coming into adulthood and how I played a role in some of that, in things that I thought I was doing right.
Well, even the fact that she's sharing that with you
yes.
is a big step.
Oh,
like, for me, I still have trouble like sharing the simplest things with my parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, but like I see other people, like families, like their kids talking to their moms, how they talk to their parents. And it's like they're talking to their friends. I'm like, wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
Are your parents here? Like, they're here? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah. But you said that you felt like you had to be your whole self before you met Brian.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even though I wasn't complete, but I felt like I knew who Erin was, and I wasn't looking for somebody to complete me or, and that was a big thing for me. Is I felt like he was okay letting me be me, with being someone who was a people pleaser, caretaker. Even though we've gone, we morph back and forth into our old familial roles,
sure,
from our childhood. But it was like very important to me that he was okay with me being who I was, and not having I have a weird career track. I am deeply analytical. I have ups and downs, and he, we're two whole people that came together. So.
That's interesting. That's very interesting, because some people would say that it doesn't matter if you're still trying to find yourself. If you find the right person, they'll come along on that ride with you.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I don't mean to say at all that I was done or perfect.
Oh, sure, for sure.
And I don't want it to come across that way. And I've gone through. We've gone through hard times as well and major transformational things, but I felt like each of us had our own foundation. I guess that's a better way to put it, before we came together.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I always knew I wanted to be married and raise a family, but I also knew I wasn't going to settle for something that didn't feel right just so I could be.
And when you were working on yourself, did you have that in mind? That the reason why I'm working on myself is to be prepared for husband, kids, all that?
No, I don't think at the time I did. I think it was because I didn't date much. I think it's funny because my sister and I were the same thing on opposite effects. She was like, I think it's such however we were raised in family. She's oldest, I'm youngest. Yeah. She was like, her whole thing was, I need to be married. I need a man. When's God going to bring the man into my life or whatever? And I'm like, I don't need anybody. I don't want anybody. I'm fine on my own. It is. And the same thing. It was still some sort of dependence. But I think what drove me to counseling was just I was so uncomfortable and unhappy, and I just knew something was wrong. And I feel like that's always been my whether it's depression or physical aches and pains, that has always been my signal that I'm not on track or something's not.
Were you aware of that?
Now in retrospect, it's always, but I've had, and again, it's not it's a long process of, and it's hard to know if some of it's depression related with aches and pains, but I've had several, like 3 major times in my life where I had major undiagnosable medical issues. Yeah. And each one created a deep
Mm-hmm.
to a new phase of my life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it was a transition into your life, not just like in your like the way your body feels or anything like that. It's everything.
But things usually resolved eventually.
Yeah, sure.
When I figured it out. And again, not in a magical thinking kind of way, and it sucked. I mean, some of these were like 1, 2, 3, 4 years of like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that all relates to the Bowen family systems. Is when we go through deep periods of anxiety, we can symptomize. And I'm not. Again, I want to be careful to say that it's all in our mind.
Right,
It's stress is very real. These medical things are very real, but I also think it's
part of life.
It's part of life. I mean, we go through things in our bodies, and I'm a very kinesthetic. I think that's also it. I think I'm a very kinesthetic person, and I love being physically active. So the only way I'm going to slow down and pay attention is
to move,
to have to have physical shit in my body that slows me down. Like,
interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like I had knee surgery. Part of it was leaving Atlanta. Even though I still have an apartment there, was moving back to Chapel Hill. We were like, I was just so unhappy. We missed our community and your knees tend to symbolize, like, if you're looking at things spiritually, like a change in direction. I'm like, oh, well, because you pivot too fast, you sprain your knee. But now it's a deeper thing of, I realize I got some stuff going on in my back and my spine, which I'm getting older, that happens. But I realize with this shift in realizing that acting is a job and teaching is my vocation and creating these new kinds of workshops, it's like, what do I align with? I'm like, no wonder I've got scoliosis. I've got this thing going this way and this thing going this way. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know. I always look for the metaphor.
Right. Yeah. Me too.
But we have never felt happier. Like coming back and being back in this community, seeing it through fresh eyes. It was like nothing. It just feels so good.
Yeah. Sometimes we need a break.
Yeah.
In order to see the light, right?
Yeah. So, and again, not to trash Atlanta. I've met wonderful people and I love it. And my agent is there and I've got some wonderful friends and I still am teaching. But it just, this is not our world. Right. And I think I misunderestimated. Is that a word? I misjudged.
There you go.
Because it was a lot of change at once. There was, my kids were leaving the nest at right about the same time. They were both graduating. The pandemic all hit. So Brian and I were empty nesters, the pandemic, and we sold the house that we pretty much raised our kids, and we did it very quickly. Yeah. And so when we got there, we realized, wow, we're in our 50s, and there's life post-pandemic. It's hard to get rerouted post-pandemic, and without kids usually just plug you into new communities.
Yeah, especially with your situation. Yeah, with the kids and selling the house and new place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then so when I was having my knee issues, and then our dog died, we're like, that's it. We're just going back to Chapel Hill. We're done.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes you need those experiences though. Like at least you know that Atlanta's not for you.
Yeah. And God, I'm like, I want to. I hope my Atlanta friends. I love all my Atlanta friends. They've told them this. They know it. And I still go back there. I have an apartment with a wonderful roommate. Katie is just. She's an actress who's quite a bit younger than me. Like she could almost be my daughter, but it just works out great. So she lives there, and I have a room there when I. Nice. I have to go teach or if I book work. Yeah. And she's so lovely when I get to go see her. So I feel like I get the best of both worlds.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you have a strong sense of self-awareness.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting throughout this whole conversation.
As do you. That's,
thanks.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's been just from what I know of you and your story, that's been a North Star for you is your own.
Yeah.
awareness.
I think now that I think of it, when I was younger, it didn't come across to me as self-awareness. It came out as rebellious and all these different things because I wanted to do this kind of thing, but people were pushing me in another direction. But I knew that this is the direction I wanted to go because of this and this and this and this. So I had that self-awareness, but it came out as rebellious.
Well, because it sounds like you had an inner knowing of who you were and where you needed to go.
Mm-hmm. And without consciously knowing.
Right. Yes. And so that trusting what was in you, it's almost like if we were using it as an acting technique, your tactic was to rebel so that you could get what you want. And so you realized that it was trusting your own soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Pretty much.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you too. So acting, were you always acting. Were you always acting? Were you acting as a kid? What's going on with that?
Yeah,
Were you in the church play?
No, actually, no.
Maria?
We didn't.
Or Mary, I mean.
Yeah, no. I grew up Catholic. They didn't do any of that crap.
Gotcha.
You know? It was, I was in elementary school, and I had friends. I just always loved to perform, and that was part of the people pleaser thing. But I always loved it too. And I would when I was a child, I remember making up little plays on my bed and like singing along to, oh my God, this is so humiliating, singing along to Barry Manilow in my bed and choreographing these dances. But I had two other friends, and during recess we would go in the library and create these little plays. They always had like a little morality, or a little like moral at the end. And our language arts teacher would let us perform them in school. Yeah.
Wow. Was that like the first time you performed?
Yeah, pretty much. And then I did, like a school play or whatever, but it wasn't until when I got into middle school, I auditioned for community theater. And
but hold on. So were you nervous performing the first time? No, because I get that feeling because you seem like you're very comfortable on stage.
Yes and no. I think I loved performing. I was not nervous and started doing musical theater. That was just my passion, and it was my social connection. It was my identity, and it was also being able to jump into these characters before I had a sense of who I was, and a way to get attention and a way to connect. So, all those teenager things.
Sure.
But I do get nervous. I do now. I had just because I would always just do shit. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. And one time I volunteered to do, we had like a fundraiser at our school for like selling magazines or something. And this was like in the 80s, and the prize was a karaoke machine. And so I demonstrated, they're like, would you demonstrate singing on the karaoke machine to like get people to win the prize? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I bombed in front of the whole school. So I feel like that set off a trigger.
Was that the first time you bombed?
That was the first time I bombed.
Okay.
And it was singing, and I've always loved singing, but it's never, I consider myself a dancer, actress, singer, but I don't really sing anymore. But I do get nervous when I sing, and I don't sing anymore.
Yeah.
And,
is it because of that moment?
Probably. I mean, I was able to overcome it because I had a big musical theater.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a career, but I did, I did summer stock, and I taught it to children and all that stuff. But, and I even, I sing in church, but I get nervous. But as far as acting, I don't get nervous. I don't think I do get nervous now just because I'm getting older and I forget my lines. But
oh, that scares me.
Yeah, I know. Well, like in live theater, it does. Not so much on camera, but I get nervous on set. I'm never not nervous on set. And that's also what, there are a few times when I haven't been. Like, you need a little of adrenaline, but I also just like, I want to be able to do this with ease.
Yeah.
And the disconnected way that sets work, disconnected meaning you're non-linear filming and having to be ready, and then are you going to be the one that slows production down? So I definitely get nervous.
I think I get nervous on set too, and I think it is sometimes I get into my own head.
Oh yeah.
And then I feel like everybody's looking at me, which they are. I mean, I'm on set, I'm in front of the camera. But like when it becomes like the Nashville TV show, like there was like 60 people, and then a bunch of them had headphones, and I knew that they were listening to my microphone. I was like, they could hear me
I know. I know. I'm like, oh my God, did they see that I did this? Or am I going to fart? Or am I going
to? And it's this whole thing of like, it's everyone's chaotic, moving around. Da, 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 da. Okay, action. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm actually doing this now.
I know. Well, and to be able to stay focused for that amount of time, like, and it's so hard. Like, I don't think people realize how hard it is. And I don't mean to sound like an affected actor, but it is so hard, especially if you're doing
mentally
deep emotional work where you need to stay in your zone. And that's like when I've been on sets where people really honored that or collaborated with you or created an environment where you could do that. Like Dope Sick was one of those shows where it was so collaborative, and Danny Strong was such a great leader, and the two directors I worked with, well, he was one of them, kept the set quiet and saw, like, there were times when when they change the shot, you step out and they bring in your stand-in and whatever, and they reset. But I was in such a place, and I asked them, can I just stay here? And like, absolutely. Just stay there. We'll work around you. Because I was just in a zone and I didn't want to get out of it. And so stuff like that. But mostly it's like, nope, go away. Blah, come in, hit your mark, do this, do this, do this. And
I think it starts with the director too. Because like, I've been on sets where...
And the first AD. They can set the tone.
Yeah, sure. But like that, I just remember one director, like the first thing that happened on set is him yelling, all right, everybody shut up and gather around. I'm like, oh my God, like it's going to be those kind of days. It's like, oh boy. And that like sets in the tension, which is not good for actors.
No. And we're, well, I don't want to say we are, I don't want to lump us in, but I'm in a place where, well, in this market, let me put it that way. In this market, generally, we're going to come in and be a co-star or recurring co-star, maybe a guest star. But I haven't had multiple days on set where you can get that kind of ease.
Yeah.
A one-liner co-star, hardest job ever.
Yeah.
And that was one of them when I booked, was it? You taped me for it, Mercy Street, when I booked Mercy Street.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous, like who's the most nervous person on set? The person with one line. And you can see it in not in my tape, but in the episode. But I also I've had a lot more training since then too. But anyway, I get on set and I don't know if people were able to look and see who it was, but I remember it must have been the first AD was like, oh, woman customer, that's going to be on your IMDb page. Like he was like mocking the fact that I had one line.
Oh,
and I'm like,
that's fucked up.
Yeah. And I mean, I hear stories like that all the time, and I get it from his perspective. Like, and he was maybe trying to make a joke. He was a total dick on set, just yelling and screaming and blah, blah, blah. To other people, not to me.
Sure.
But I don't think people realize that, to book that job, there were 1,000 submissions. 100 people probably brought in a tape.
Yeah.
At that point, we were driving. I drove for a callback, and it was like a 3-week process before I booked it.
Which
and
means
that
it narrowed it down to like what, 50 to 25 maybe for a callback?
Well, I don't know at that point if it was in person. I've always heard about set. It depends because it's changed so much with the virtual world. But and then I was shitting a brick on set because I didn't have. Now I feel like I have much, even though I've been acting my whole life and I have talent, and I even had technique and understanding. But now I have so much more comprehensive understanding of like what you need to do to be ready to be on set.
Yeah,
like
nobody really talks about that too.
Yeah, and that's and it's not. Because for people that come from a stage life and transition into film, the director usually tells you everything you got to do. At least in most kind of semi-professional theater or community theater or whatever. Even, but it's not. You come in with all your ideas and your character and all this stuff, and then you try it out. You do what you start with the tape you sent in, that performance, and then if the director asks for more, but. And if you come into a show that's a well-oiled machine and like, yep, got it. It's not about you. It's about the series regulars.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of made a little mistake when I first got into the acting, and I got like it was like semi-big independent film.
Yeah.
And I had this, and it wasn't a one line, but it was one scene. And, I had my line, and we were doing a read through on Zoom or something like that, or on the phone.
Yeah.
And after the read through, I talked to the director. I was like, how does my character do this, or like, should I have my hair like slicked back?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't, just come in and read the line. Just like, know your role.
Right,
is
right,
what
yeah.
I learned.
Yeah.
So know your role.
Right. But that's normal for people. I mean, again, it's like we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Until we know it.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like that's so much of what I do as a teacher and a mentor for younger actors is help them to understand that they have agency over their craft. And you are going to feel so much better going to a set or going to an audition if you are using your own creativity. You're first bringing yourself to the role.
Yeah.
You've got to start with you, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
then I'm a big fan of, I teach Uta Hagen, and it's like, use yourself, source yourself, I also don't feel like I'm very imaginative. I'm very linear. So I like the research part. And I'm like, I'm just going to, this is in my bedroom, like, cause I know it, and I know people like to use their imagination more.
Yeah.
But create all those questions and then I have so many students be like, what should I do with my hair? I'm like, you know what? They have a stylist for that. You don't worry about your hair.
Yeah.
You do the best performance you can, and honest to God, that is all that matters. I mean, yeah, you need it technically right, but it doesn't need to be nearly as technically perfect as you think it does.
You just got to make a decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's all they care about. As long as you can get a decision, then they could direct you from
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did you get into musical theater first, or?
Yes. Okay. Well, I did the little morality plays in school. Yeah. But I always loved singing and dancing, and that was most of the community theater I did was musical theater.
Nice.
And that's actually, I borrowed so much of what I did all growing up in my own work with children throughout most of my life, and it's because it helped shape me so much, and I wanted to help.
How do you think that helped shape you?
Oh,
I feel like it.
You tell me. You tell me. No, please.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, what you should do.
Okay. I guess musical theater really does help you get into the body because you're vocalizing it. It's almost like the Lee Strasberg technique.
Yes. Yeah.
Because like you're relaxing and releasing the tension through sound.
Yes.
And that's what you're doing when you're singing, right? So like, shoo, and you're moving along.
I love that. Yeah. And I think it was so kinesthetic for me, and it was so much fun. And live theater. I also think playing characters gave me so much joy and helped me identify with emotions until I got to a place where I had a sense of self. Because I think I was much more able to step in and out of characters, but I don't think that's necessarily healthy. Like I mean, it can be, but now I'm so focused on starting with yourself. And I actually would rather be myself. And that's part of my wrestling with acting is I would rather be a television host. Like, that's why I love hosting.
I said that the other day. I was like, I think I would be a really
I
good host.
would love it in the jobs I've had. And and I come by it honestly just because that's what teaching is. You're basically hosting. And I've exercised my muscles so much more in that than, I mean, even though I've acted forever and done it forever, like hour per hour, I've been teaching way more. And that you're basically a life host. And then facilitating workshops, I get so much joy. I mean, I think because it feeds my desire to be on and be performing, but it also is deeply fulfilling I get so excited by the revelations or the connections or the understanding that other people get through it.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to articulate this out loud. Thank you, Oliver. But really, I mean, and I think I don't want to, piss anybody off or like, I love my agents and I'm going to Latvia to shoot a commercial. Like that's exciting for me. And I love doing commercials. Most actors can't stand it. I love it.
Really?
Like,
what is it about commercials that get you?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would, if I could be a series regular and something like Dope Sick for the rest of my life, like all in. But it's because I got into film and television. I got into on-camera work by doing commercials because those were the markets I lived in pre-virtual world. You had to kind of live in an area to audition.
Yeah.
And so I booked a lot of commercials. I have a look for it. I have an energy for it. And now that I really understand the craft, I have a really solid understanding of how to audition for it. More than just like, I'm just going to do this. Like you really, I mean, even though I have thrown together quick commercial auditions and trusted it, when you really approach it the same way you approach a film and television commercial with craft, it's like I just started booking them.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
And you go for a day or two. You tend to make more money depending on what it is, and you usually get to travel. And the product usually is good, even if it can be sometimes embarrassing or whatever. But it's like I don't have to put my life on hold to go do a commercial. And like for this one, like I don't even know I know what the product's going to be. But I get to go to Latvia.
Yeah.
I'm like so excited. I'm like, I don't care if it's a commercial,
Right.
So how are we talking? I don't even know what we're talking about. So I don't even know. Sorry, I'm all over the place.
You're fine. But let's get back to your acting career.
Oh,
so you got into the musical theater, and then like, what was the next step for you in your acting career?
Gosh, what was it?
It was you did the regular theater.
Yeah, I did regular theater. Right? I majored in theater in college.
Oh, okay.
I went to Denison University. I was a classmate with Jennifer Garner. She was 2 years behind me. I always used to tell my fun fact. She was my understudy. I know, but she's lovely. She's every bit as nice and approachable as she appears to be. And I kept hoping, like, I know she's doing stuff in Atlanta. I'm like, God, can we, like, she's the brunette, I'm the blonde. Let's get that old chemistry going back together. But anyway, so I studied theater. I did, after college, that's kind of when I got a little lost. And because I knew I didn't want to go to New York or LA. I knew it would eat me up. And I knew I didn't have, and I think that was part of the depression was like, my parents were living in Maine and I went to live in Maine in this cold, dark, beautiful place. But like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah. And is it like the like you're not strong enough for it or something?
I didn't think I was strong enough for it. And it's so interesting now that I say this. I always thought there would be a backdoor way to do it. Like, there's
right? Everyone thinks so.
Yeah, and not easily. Maybe then I thought easily, but
sure.
And now to use my 53. Oh my God, I'm 53 now. My 53-year-old self using the language, not a backdoor way, but a non-traditional path.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
And that's like, and to me, getting the commercial in Latvia was a perfect example of that. Like I'm starting to shed things that I don't want in my life anymore and figuring out my relationship with the industry. And this wasn't even a job I booked through my agent. I booked it through a European talent website. I brought my agent into it, but it was like such a gift because it came after I've let go of some things, decided what kind of acting jobs I want to do. And like, really, this has all happened very recently. Like teaching is my vocation.
Sure.
And then it was like, God just kind of like dropped this in, like, but you can still act and do some fun travel things, but I don't want to be spending 20, 30 hours a week auditioning anymore. Like, I know what it takes to audition for a show, and I don't want to do that anymore unless it's a project I really care about, a project I need, or a place I want to visit.
That's where I am.
Yeah.
Like I stopped acting.
Yeah.
I stopped acting a few years before COVID, like a year before COVID or something like that. But because of the same reason, I got so sick of auditioning and memorizing skills. I had so much other things going on in my life that I was like, acting took a back burner for me.
Yeah.
Like, when I got an audition, like my first reaction would be like,
yes, yeah.
It didn't matter if it was a TV show or a series, right? Whatever it is.
You get that because you get that alert in you. Because my things from my agent are talking. I'm like, and that sounds terrible. I'm like, maybe I should be listening to that. And it's not that I don't. Again, now I know where I want to draw the line and what I don't even want to be submitted for anymore.
Is your agent okay with that?
We haven't had a conversation about it yet.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, actually, yes. When the strike happened, they're also very wonderful. My agents are amazing, and they do know. I mean, they have said it's okay to turn down what you want to turn down.
Sure.
But I think I've just recently come to this place where I don't want to keep turning things down. I think I need to let them know, please don't submit me for these kinds of projects anymore. Like, maybe I really want to focus on higher quality, higher paid, or personal projects that have personal meaning for me, and commercials.
Right.
And like I think I want to like get rid of, because I have not joined the union yet.
Right.
Even though I have been eligible for a long time.
Same.
Because I make a lot of money doing non-union commercials.
Yeah.
And but I think I need to have the conversation with, maybe it's time to not submit me for the low budget non-union or even the low budget SAG unless it's a project I want, just because I don't want to put that much effort in. Not that I'm lazy. I just want to. I've got.
Other things
I want to work on my
on.
teaching career and I want to work on this workshop thing. And,
I've been thinking about getting back into acting, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but like again, I want to do the same thing. I'm just like not for everything.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to go down to Charlotte every time just for. I don't like commercials as much as you do.
Yeah, I
but
know.
commercials.
Right. Yeah. No, I get it. Well, but the virtual world has changed that so much.
Sure.
Pandemic,
I mean, I know.
but still.
Charlotte. They
right, but
they
I
always want to see somebody and call back for something.
And you know how many times I've been on first refusal for SAG national projects and got released? I mean, I'm just like, okay, yeah,
yeah, that's all you can do.
That's
right?
all you can do. Yeah,
Just move on.
It's like okay, we'll move on.
Right.
So, but anyway, you were talking about the career path. Oh,
Yeah.
so I did musical
right.
theater. I was in Maine, and I got a totally different job. I worked in a school as an interpreter for a deaf child. I know it was not sign language. It was a different communication system that the deaf culture probably frowns upon now. I don't even know if it's still used, but it got me into deaf culture. So I did learn sign, and I loved that job. And
Interesting.
and I taught dance classes, and I choreographed local musical theater.
Nice.
And then when I got back on my feet a little bit, then I started looking for an agent, and I got like a local agent, not local Maine, but there was actually like a northeastern Maine, Boston kind of agent. And that's where I booked my first commercial. And then I moved around a lot. So
how was that first commercial? Because that was your first like big thing.
Yeah, it was my first big thing.
Like,
it was
with your agent
I was like quaking. It was a public service announcement for like must have been some sort of education something, and I played someone just out of college, not able to get a job, and I'm sitting in a diner like circling all the things, and I was so excited, but I didn't realize it would be what 2 or 3 years before I booked my next one,
Well, even getting an agent, like you tell people, like, I got to talk to my agent about your agent.
I'm like, oh no, it's not that.
It's not like that. But.
No, right. And then, long story short, married Brian, moved to upstate New York, and
Wait, who? Mary Brian?
Brian married my husband,
married.
Brian.
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 I was like, who's Mary Brian?
Mary Brian. So no, I married Brian, and we lived like in a very rural part of New York. We lived in the Adirondacks, and I did. Before that, no, actually, I booked a national tour with a deaf and hearing theater.
Oh, nice.
So I did Children of a Lesser God. The production was terrible, but the experience was challenging. It was fabulous because I became fluent in sign. But it was a big growing up experience for me. Here's a white suburban 23-year-old, naive, and for the first time being immersed. And again, it's so weird to even say this now because the world has changed so much, because we're so open to diversity in all walks of life. But at 23, it was, I was the minority being hearing, and in understanding what deaf culture was, and then working with people just so diverse in terms of gender and sexuality and race, and it was just a big, huge learning experience.
Why did you get into that in the first place? Working with deaf people.
Because I had worked for 2 years in this school system with this deaf child, and I really fell in love with deaf culture and the language. And I'm like, wow, there's got to be a way to connect this with acting. Like, it's so fun. Like, I feel like my whole life has been finding a passion and connecting it to acting. And back then, we didn't have the internet. So I wrote to, the School for the Deaf in, is it Connecticut? And because they had a deaf and hearing touring troupe that educated people about deaf culture. Oh. And I got a list of all the deaf and hearing theaters in the country, and I just sent my resume to every one of them. And one of them kept them on file because like 6 months, a year later, they're like, hey, we're doing a tour and we need an actress that can sign and can act. I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
There you go.
So I moved to Cleveland and toured for a year. Yeah. And then I met my husband. I was and moved to this very rural area. And so I started a dance company. And that's when I started really working with kids in earnest. And then I was also doing regional theater at this theater in the Adirondacks. Did a lot of musical theater there. Yeah. And had an agent, but did very little film work, you know. Yeah. It wasn't until my husband got transferred to, we moved to Mississippi. We lived in Mississippi for 5 years. That was another learning experience. So we lived in a suburb of Jackson and a suburb of Memphis. And when I had my agent in Memphis, that's when things really got rolling. I did a lot of commercial work. I was at the right age.
Really?
I had a lot of hosty things, a lot of commercial things. But that was when a movie called Nothing But the Truth was filming there, even though the whole thing took place in DC. It was it's a great movie. It never it got a full release, but if you can find it, it was fabulous. It was based on when Valerie Plame was, I can't even think of that. This is so long ago. She was a spy, and her source, Judith Miller, wouldn't reveal her source and all this kind of stuff. Okay. So it was loosely based on that. Yeah. And it was the first movie I booked, and it was opposite. It was one day co-star, or no, it was movie, one day supporting. But it was with, I played David Schwimmer's mistress. Oh. And it was a scene, my very first film experience ever was a scene with David Schwimmer and Alan Alda.
There you go.
Yeah. And I wasn't nervous because I didn't know what to be afraid of. I'm like, I got nothing to lose. You know? Now I realize I should have been way more nervous because I didn't do nearly now I know what I should have done. But it was fun. It was a great experience. And
so then you started picking up more things, right?
More things, yeah.
And so obviously that creates a shift in your life.
Yes.
Because you went from teaching, dancing, and singing, right?
Yes.
And so did you feel that shift happening?
No, they were side by side for a long time because everywhere I moved, I created a new version of the musical theater school that I had, which eventually became what I built in Chapel Hill that grew for 10 years. And it was but what it was for me was it was a parallel experience, and what it became a struggle because as I started, because I loved teaching so much, but I was turning down auditions and acting work because I felt so committed, because it was, if I had to be, it was my business. And so if there was a show, I had to be there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I felt like I couldn't, and eventually I built a wonderful team that I could really rely on. But then it got to the point where I really wanted to let go of the teaching so I could fully submerge myself in acting. And that was when I moved to Atlanta.
Gotcha.
Even though I did a lot, I did a lot of them together.
Yeah.
But then still when I moved to Atlanta, I was teaching for studios. I was doing a lot of coaching.
What is it about teaching that you like? Because I feel like you're an actual teacher.
I love teaching. But again, I'm not certified. I never, I'm certifiable, but right. I never got certified. I never worked as a traditional teacher in elementary school. Same, yeah. But I think again, it goes back to my childhood self. What theater did for me growing up, it was giving me that sense of self. And it's such a passion. And I think it was Carrie Marshall and I she was a teacher in one of my programs a long time ago. We did a summer program together. And I'm going to quote her, she just said, Erin, the way you are literally pulling a performance out of these kids. And like, I got to now I don't want to work that hard to pull the performance out. I want to teach them to do it.
Yeah.
But it was such joy for me to watch kids of all variety of talent find joy in it, find structure in it, find passion for the arts in it. And to me, it's the connecting of the dots. It's all parts of yourself.
Yeah,
and that's why
the dots.
Yeah, and it's why I like script analysis so much. It's connecting it's why I like self-growth.
Yeah,
you know, it's all connecting the dots.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, connecting the dots, especially, like, man, that's the number one thing that it did for me. When I was teaching and stuff like that. So you can see it in the students too. Like when they have that realization, it's like, oh, like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and trusting process, because we don't always I don't trust my own. Well, I've got to a point where when I was developing these musicals with these kids, that I began to trust the process, and I'm like, okay, I know this is the messy part and this is this, and I don't always trust that in other parts of my life, but what else do we have other than process? Like occasionally we have product, but
trusting the process is hard.
Trusting the process is hard.
It's probably the hardest thing in the acting.
It's the hardest thing in life.
In life too, yeah. You gotta trust yourself that you know.
Right. And having young actors co-create in that process. And again, I keep coming. I know this is sort of an overused word right now, but having agency over the choices they make and over their creative selves, and it gives them self-confidence.
Yeah.
And helping them, again, I'm very kinesthetic, getting them in their bodies, getting them to use their voices, and meeting them wherever they are.
Yeah.
Because you can have like this super talented kid and I don't want to say the kid that has never done it before.
Right.
And that's okay. Because that's what I mean. Because you can have someone that's never done acting who can book a role in film just by the nature of who they are, and it happens all the time. And that collaborative process, and part of it, going back to the Bowen systems theory, is I felt so much of it was that triangular relationship between the child and their parent or parents and me, which could be exasperating at times. Some part of that was also why I got out of it, because it was like, going back to my mentor D, talking about not wanting to be around anxious people. People are so anxious these days, so it's like let's just relax in our performance, and and they don't have to be a star, they don't have to be perfect. Even though I had high standards, like I did, we're gonna work and we're gonna rehearse. Like this play takes a lot of work. So, but I did like that too. When there was that relationship, I just had a conversation with a parent yesterday. So I'm still teaching in-person classes at Drama Inc. I'm going back and forth with these kids there, and the students are just wonderful. And this one mom said, "Can I just talk to you about my daughter? And she really loves this. And where should we go with it?" And we just had a half-hour conversation, and it was like, and it wasn't her being like, "My daughter's great." It was this really honest, intuitive. Parent to parent, and then I was telling her all this stuff, like I'm in a period of discernment too. She's like, I am too, and so we got into her. I don't know.
Nice
that
connection
me.
there.
Connection,
yeah. It's all about the connection.
It's all
At
about
the end of
the
the
connection.
Day, it's about the connection.
Genuine connection.
Yeah.
Which sometimes can be really messy.
Yes. But you know what? That's okay.
That's okay.
Because that's what you had to go through.
Right, yeah.
I appreciate you coming by.
Thanks. Well, that went fast.
Yeah.
I feel like I talked way too much. I didn't ask you anything.
I'm so sad. Nobody asked me anything. Ever. That's all right. That's okay. Thanks for coming by, though.
Thanks. That was wonderful.
Yeah. All right. That's it.
All right. Wow, you're good at that.
Oh, thanks.
You should host this. Yeah. You make that really easy.